When working on a large quilt, I like to start my binding in this bottom left-hand corner because this is an area where your eye doesn't really pick up much as it moves across the quilt. I'll be joining the other end of the binding right here. If I don't do this so well, you won't notice it as much. I like to leave about 9 to 10 inches free so that I have extra room to work when I have to join that other edge of the binding. I'll start sewing about here. I'll use a 1/4 inch seam, but this will vary based on the size of your binding. When I start sewing, I like to lock my stitch. I'll also use a regular stitch length. You can use your walking foot or just a regular foot, whichever you prefer. I'll stitch into this corner, and because I'm using a 1/4 inch seam, I'll stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge and then I'll back stitch. So let me take this over to the machine to show you what that looks like. I'm using red thread. Normally I use a neutral color thread, but the red thread will make it easier for you to see. I have a pin here just as a reminder that that's where I want to start sewing. Usually I don't use pins because I find that it distorts the fabric. But if you feel more comfortable pinning, then that's fine. So let me take that out and I'm ready to begin. I'll sew 1 to 2 stitches and then I back stitch to lock those stitches in place. So I'll sew down to this corner and I will stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. So let me pull this out. Pulled my binding out of the sewing machine, and now I'm ready to turn this corner. I want to take my binding and let's see, put it back like so. You'll notice when I do this, when I fold it back, there's this 45-degree angle that's formed here. I want to make sure that my binding is even with the quilt here before I move on. So let's get this binding even with that. And now I'm going to flip it forward. When I flip it forward, I want my binding to be even with the quilt here, and I want it to be even with the top. And you'll notice this is a little bit too, there's too much binding there. So let me flip this down a little bit. Get that nice and even right there. And now I'm ready to sew. Take this over to my sewing machine and I'll place it under my foot. I want to go back 1 or 2 stitches. So I want to make sure that I catch the edge, and then I'll come forward. And I'll sew like this. I'll continue sewing all the way around till I get to the next corner. Let me do this again away from the machine. I've sewn to the end here and stopped a 1/4 inch from the edge. Now I'm ready to flip this binding back, make this binding line up with this edge of the quilt. You'll notice there's a 45-degree angle here when I do that. I'm ready to flip it back. When I flip the binding back, I want to line this fold here with the top of my quilt. I see. And this binding should line up with the edge here.